Up to 4 minutes, Mr Brown.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'd like to start by acknowledging that everybody in the Chamber has support for Scotland's culture sector and the fact that it's very important to the economy and our lives, including, of course, in my own constituency of Clackmannanshire and Dunblane. Not only do we have the national cultural highlights like the Japanese Garden in Cowden, about a mile from my house, but also innumerable creative businesses, 2 independent cinemas, one in Alloa, another at the Macrobert Arts Centre, which offers a fantastic and wide-ranging cultural and creative programme that goes far beyond simply screening films, as well as many other local creative groups that contribute immensely to public life. I can think of the Dunblane Museum, for example, or the Leighton Library, the first purpose-built library in Scotland in Dunblane. So for that reason, I was very pleased to hear the First Minister's announcement last week that the Scottish Government will more than double investment in Scotland's arts and culture sector with an additional £100 million of funding over the next 5 years, an immense vote of confidence in our culture sector from the Scottish Government. It's merely just a small additional bonus to hear all the whinging from the opposition parties who seem far more concerned about an announcement like that than they were about the culture sector before that announcement. But I would like to pass on my thanks to the Labour Party for taking the time to show their appreciation for the commitment in their motion, which notes the announcement made by the First Minister on the 17th of October to more than double arts and culture funding over the next 5 years, one of many positive announcements from the SNP conference in Aberdeen last week, and I look forward to the Labour Party supporting more of those positive announcements. I mentioned earlier that many creative organisations across my constituency in the culture sector, and I think in our politics and in our society, we can often be guilty of underestimating the value of culture and the arts and the purely economic value that we know they can contribute. What was always true but became particularly notable during the difficult pandemic was that regardless of any economic input or output from the culture sector, culture and the arts is an essential part of the human experience, and it's essential that as a Parliament we recognise that. While funding is extremely important for the culture sector, I would note there are bigger picture constitutional considerations when it comes to Scotland's culture and arts sector, which have not been mentioned in this motion. One of the greatest upsets of Scotland's culture and arts sector in recent years has been the changes that Brexit has meant for Scottish artists. I know that the Tories tried to mention it, so we don't mention it because they hate to have it mentioned. But the artists know this to be the case, especially those seeking to tour and sell merchandise in the EU. And I'm aware that some progress has been made on this. Any agreement, though, that the UK has with the EU or individual member states is absolutely no replacement for the freedom of movement and goods enjoyed by Scottish artists across the continent prior to Brexit. And if we are serious about supporting Scotland's cultural sector, we should be serious about addressing these constitutional issues as well. And I note that Angus Robertson's amendment to this motion rightly makes that clear. I can't think why the Brexit parties don't want to mention it at all, given how important it is to the sector. Another way that Scotland promotes our distinct culture and arts offerings through the Scottish Government's international presence. And while I note that the Labour Party has been supportive of Scotland's international ambitions in the past, the recent muscular unionism on display from the Labour Party indicates that they'd fall in line behind the Tories to quell Scotland's international voice, given the chance to do so. And I'd argue, therefore, it's very telling the Labour Party have chosen to omit any mention of any constitutional issue from this motion. So while the SNP government is taking action to support Scotland's culture, and I should say I very much welcome the announcement that's been made by the government by doubling funding over the next 5 years, it's also clear that the current constitutional arrangement does Scotland's culture and arts sector an immense disservice. And I'd urge everybody in the Chamber to consider this when making decisions on how best to support Scotland's culture and arts sector going forward, and I support the motion in the Government's name.
Thank you, Mr Brown.